Hey guys, tonight we're going to take a long, slow stroll through the fascinating and perhaps surprisingly soporific history of something many of us probably can't imagine living without: spectacles. Close your eyes for a moment, if you dare, and imagine a world without clear vision. You're squinting at ancient scrolls, trying to decipher faded hieroglyphs under flickering lamplight, your eyes aching, your head throbbing. Or perhaps you're a medieval scribe, hunched over parchment, painstakingly copying texts, your vision blurring with each passing year, the intricate details of illuminated manuscripts becoming a hazy smear. You probably wouldn't survive a single manuscript. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. I always love to see how far these sleepy stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Our story begins not with glass lenses, but with a much more ancient, almost intuitive desire to see more clearly. Imagine, if you will, being an ancient Babylonian scholar poring over cuneiform tablets. You're already a master of astronomical observation, tracking the movements of celestial bodies with remarkable precision. But the tiny etchings on your clay tablets are starting to blur. What do? Well, if you were living thousands of years ago, you might have reached for something smooth and transparent. We're talking about early magnifying glasses, though not in the way we typically think of them. Archaeological finds, such as the so-called Nimrud lens unearthed in modern-day Iraq, suggest that as early as the 7th century BCE, people were experimenting with polished crystals. This particular artifact, made of rock crystal, has a focal length that would indeed allow it to be used as a magnifier. Now, whether it was actually used for reading tiny script, or simply as an ornamental piece, or even to start fires, remains an open scholarly debate. Some historians argue it was primarily a decorative item, while others see it as clear evidence of early optical understanding. But the very existence of such a carefully crafted piece of transparent material, round and polished, hints at a burgeoning awareness of light and magnification. Think about it. Before electricity, before even proper windows, light was a precious commodity. And anything that could enhance vision, even slightly, would have been incredibly valuable. You're probably picturing a dusty, dimly lit workshop, the gentle rasp of stone on crystal, day after day, week after week, as someone meticulously shapes a piece of quartz. It's not exactly a bustling factory line, is it? More like a quiet, meditative process, driven by the simple, enduring human desire to perceive the world more clearly. You can almost feel the smooth, cool surface of the stone in your own hand, imagining the painstaking effort. And really, isn't that just a delightful thought? The idea that even thousands of years ago, someone was patiently polishing a rock just to get a slightly better look at their ancient equivalent of a spreadsheet, or perhaps their shopping list. Who knows? But they certainly weren't complaining about digital eye strain. As we gently float forward in time, leave the dusty plains of ancient Mesopotamia behind, and drift with me to the cloistered quiet of medieval monasteries. Imagine the chill dampness of a scriptorium, the faint scent of parchment and beeswax, and the steady, rhythmic scratching of quill on vellum. You are a monk, perhaps Brother Thomas, whose days are spent meticulously copying ancient texts. This isn't just about reading. It's about preserving knowledge, line by painstaking line. Your eyes, once sharp and unburdened, are now beginning to fail you. The intricate Gothic script, with its tight kerning and elaborate flourishes, blurs into an illegible tangle. The subtle variations in ink, the occasional tremor of a previous scribe's hand, all are lost to your increasingly cloudy vision. For centuries, there was simply no effective remedy for failing eyesight beyond basic herbal remedies or, more often, resignation. If you were a weaver, a jeweler, or a scribe, and your vision deteriorated, your career, your very livelihood, could simply vanish. It was a silent, slow kind of tragedy, played out in countless quiet rooms across the medieval world. Monks, in particular, suffered. Their lives revolved around reading and writing, often in less than ideal lighting conditions. Historians still argue whether the prevalence of short-sightedness among monastic scribes contributed to the development of certain manuscript styles, with larger, more spaced-out lettering becoming common as an aid. It's a compelling thought, isn't it? That a physical limitation could subtly reshape the very aesthetics of an entire era's artistic output. So, while you might be imagining a dramatic, sudden blindness for most, it was a gradual fading, a creeping fog that slowly obscured the world. You'd find yourself leaning closer, until your nose was almost touching the page, your back aching, your neck stiff. Then came the headaches, the constant strain taking its toll. There was no going to the optician for a new prescription, no quick fix. You simply had to endure or find new, less visually demanding work, which for a monk was often not an option. One quirky tidbit from this era, though its veracity is debated, speaks of reading stones. These were essentially polished, plano-convex pieces of quartz or beryl, much like the Nimrod lens we chatted about earlier, but used specifically for reading. They would be placed directly on the page, magnifying the text beneath. Think of it as a very, very early, very clunky magnifying glass. While they offered some relief, they were cumbersome and provided only limited correction for conditions like presbyopia or old age sight, which was rampant among these studious individuals. Imagine trying to read an entire theological treatise by constantly moving a heavy fist-sized crystal across the page. It sounds more exhausting than relaxing, doesn't it? You might even fall asleep from the sheer effort, which, ironically, might be the original boring history for sleep method. But for those dedicated souls, it was a lifeline, a way to cling to their beloved texts just a little longer before the darkness truly encroached. It truly highlights the ingenious, if sometimes clumsy, human drive to overcome physical limitations, even when the solutions were far from perfect. From the dim, incense-laden scriptoriums, our journey now takes a rather significant leap forward, both geographically and technologically, to late 13th century Italy. This is where the story of wearable spectacles, as we recognize them, truly begins to take shape, though not without a healthy dose of historical mystery and scholarly debate. For centuries, the invention of spectacles has been popularly attributed to a man named Salvino D'Armate. You might have heard his name whispered in dusty libraries, or seen it etched on plaques in historical optical museums. The legend, which gained traction centuries after his supposed lifetime, tells of a brilliant, almost reclusive inventor in Florence, who, around the year 1286, finally cracked the code of crafting two corrective lenses mounted in a frame that could rest upon the nose. It's a rather romantic image, isn't it? A eureka moment in a quiet workshop, the perfect solution suddenly appearing. However, historians still argue whether Salvino D'Armate was indeed the singular inventor or even an inventor at all. The evidence for his role is, shall we say, a bit blurry. Much of it stems from an epitaph, purportedly found centuries later, praising him for the invention. Yet contemporary records from the late 13th and early 14th centuries mention other figures. For instance, Alessandro dalla Spina, a Dominican friar, is also cited as having invented spectacles, but purportedly refused to share his knowledge, keeping the secret to himself. Now, wouldn't that be just like some people? To invent something world-changing, and then just ... hoard it. Imagine the frustration if you were his nearsighted neighbor. The more commonly accepted, albeit less romantic, view is that spectacles were the result of a gradual evolution, perhaps spurred on by multiple individuals tinkering with existing glassmaking and optical knowledge. The city of Pisa, in particular, seems to have been a hub of early optical innovation, with figures like Roger Bacon having made important observations about the magnifying properties of lenses even earlier. So, while you might want to envision Salvino D'Armate as the lone genius, the reality is likely more nuanced, a slow bubbling up of an idea whose time had truly come. It's almost like trying to pinpoint the exact moment someone first thought of putting cheese on bread. Many people probably had the same idea around the same time. What is undeniable, however, is that by the early 1300s, spectacles were certainly in use in Italy. They weren't universally available, of course. These early frames were typically made from bone, metal, or leather, and the lenses, while a marvel, were far from perfect. You wouldn't be walking into a lens crafter's for a quick eye exam and a new pair. Instead, you'd probably seek out a craftsman, perhaps even a monastic glassmaker, to grind bespoke lenses for your aging eyes. The sensation of putting them on, of having the world snap back into focus after years of blur, must have been nothing short of miraculous. It's hard to truly grasp the impact this seemingly simple invention had, transforming the lives of scholars, merchants, and artisans, extending their productive years, and allowing knowledge to continue to flow. And think of the poor scribes, like our friend Brother Thomas from before. Suddenly, a lifetime of tedious copying became just a little less blurry. A gentle chuckle might escape you at the thought of the medieval equivalent of an optometrist's office, perhaps tucked away in a quiet alley, smelling faintly of ground glass and patience. As the 14th century dawned and spectacles slowly, steadily, gained a foothold in European society, something interesting began to happen. They started to become a fashion statement. No longer merely practical aids for failing vision, spectacles, particularly among the educated and elite, transformed into symbols of wisdom, learning, and status. Imagine yourself as a wealthy merchant in bustling Renaissance Florence, perhaps haggling over textiles in the market. You might subtly adjust a pair of spectacles perched elegantly on your nose, not just to better see the weave of the fabric, but to project an air of scholarly gravitas and intellectual acumen. Oh, these old things? You might almost hear them muse. Just a little something to help me read my ledgers. And maybe a few philosophical treatises on the side. These weren't the flimsy plastic frames you see today, of course. Early spectacle frames were often crafted from precious materials, intricately carved bone or horn, polished wood, or even various metals. You might find delicate silver frames, perhaps even adorned with subtle engravings, signifying the wearer's wealth and refinement. The lenses themselves, still a marvel of craftsmanship, added to their exclusivity. To own a pair was to signal that you were a person of letters, someone who read, who thought, who engaged with the world beyond manual labor. It was, in its own way, the original geek chic, centuries before it became a hashtag. This shift in perception is a fascinating aspect of history, isn't it? An item born of necessity, gradually morphing into an accessory of aspiration. Historians still argue whether the proliferation of spectacles in portraiture of the era was purely for accuracy, or, if it was, in part, a deliberate artistic choice to convey the sitter's intelligence and social standing. You see portraits of cardinals, scholars, and even popes proudly wearing their spectacles, looking rather distinguished, if a little owlish. It certainly beat the alternative of squinting through life. One quirky tidbit from this period involves early spectacle cases. Since the frames were often quite delicate and expensive, and the lenses prone to scratching, custom-made cases became a necessity. These weren't just utilitarian boxes. They were often miniature works of art themselves, made from fine leather, velvet, or even intricately carved wood, designed to protect their precious contents. Imagine pulling out a beautifully embossed leather case from your tunic. A faint whisper of status accompanying the gentle click as you open it to retrieve your reading aids. It's a far cry from the utilitarian plastic cases you get at the optometrists today, often covered in smudges and forgotten receipts. This subtle display of wealth and intellectual pursuit added another layer to the emerging spectacle fashion. It also meant that if you misplaced your glasses, you weren't just out a few dollars. You were out a significant investment, possibly a year's wages for some. So you can imagine the sheer panic if you woke up in the morning and couldn't find them. Suddenly, your carefully curated image of a discerning scholar might crumble, leaving you just a person who couldn't read the breakfast menu. Floating onward from the courts and studies of Renaissance Europe, we arrive in a pivotal moment for anyone who's ever fumbled for a separate pair of reading glasses or wished for a single lens that could do it all. Imagine yourself in the late 18th century, perhaps in a quiet study in Philadelphia. You've got a stack of letters to read, perhaps a scientific paper, and then you need to look up to observe the lightning outside your window. But wait, you have to switch glasses. This rather inconvenient truth was a daily reality for many, until one particularly inventive mind decided enough was enough. We are, of course, talking about Benjamin Franklin, the polymath, diplomat, and all-around fascinating figure. Franklin, ever the pragmatist, suffered from both presbyopia and myopia. He found the constant swapping between two pairs of spectacles incredibly annoying. Now you might think, well, just deal with it, Ben. But Franklin was not a man to simply deal with it if a better solution could be engineered. He applied his keen observational skills and practical ingenuity to the problem. The result? The invention of bifocals around 1784. His solution was elegantly simple, yet revolutionary. He cut the lenses from two different pairs of spectacles in half, placing the convex lens for reading in the lower half of the frame and the concave lens in the upper half. This meant that by simply looking up or down, you could effortlessly shift your focus, seeing both near and far with a single pair of glasses. It was a genuine, "Why didn't I think of that?" moment for countless frustrated spectacle wearers. Imagine the quiet satisfaction you'd feel, smoothly transitioning from reading a letter to glancing at a bird outside your window, all without that awkward fumbling. It was, in essence, the original hands-free device. Historians still argue whether Franklin truly invented the bifocal from scratch, or if he merely popularized and refined an existing, perhaps less-known concept. Some theories suggest that early versions of segmented lenses may have existed prior to his widely recognized contribution. However, it was Franklin's advocacy and the clear utility of his design that truly brought bifocals into the mainstream. It's almost like debating who truly invented the sandwich. Was it the Earl of Sandwich? Or just some nameless person who put meat between two slices of bread centuries earlier? Regardless, Franklin certainly put his stamp on it. A quirky tidbit: Franklin originally referred to his invention as double spectacles. The term bifocals came into use much later. Can you imagine going to the optician and asking for a pair of double spectacles? It sounds more like something out of a quirky historical comedy, doesn't it? But the impact was profound. It dramatically improved the quality of life for millions, especially those in professions requiring both close-up work and distance viewing, like surveyors, navigators, and, of course, other brilliant polymaths who simply didn't have time to constantly switch their eyewear. It allowed individuals to remain productive and engaged with the world for longer, delaying the moment when fading vision might force them into early retirement or a life of blurry frustration. From Franklin's ingenious double spectacles, we gently glide into an era of increasing industrialization and, crucially, democratization. For centuries, while spectacles had evolved from crude magnifiers to relatively refined bifocals, they remained, for many, a luxury. Getting a pair was often a bespoke affair, requiring skilled craftsmen and a significant investment. But as the 19th century gave way to the 20th, the wheels of mass production began to turn, transforming spectacles from exclusive tools of the learned elite into everyday necessities accessible to a much broader population. Imagine yourself in a bustling late 19th century city. Perhaps you're a factory worker or a shopkeeper, and your vision is no longer as sharp as it once was. Previously, this might have meant the end of your working life. Now, thanks to advances in manufacturing techniques, the cost of producing glass lenses and sturdy frames plummeted. Suddenly, off-the-shelf spectacles became a reality. You could walk into a general store, or even a traveling peddler's cart, and pick out a pair that seemed to offer some improvement. These weren't custom-ground lenses, of course, but for many, a generic magnification was still infinitely better than none at all. It was the advent of what we might call ready-made vision. This period also saw significant standardization in lens powers and frame sizes. Before, every pair was almost unique. Now, you'd start to see common prescriptions, labeled with numbers, making it easier for people to find something that roughly suited their needs. This shift was a quiet revolution. It meant that a grandmother in a rural village could now read letters from her distant children. A farmer could mend his tools with greater precision, and a craftsman could continue his trade into old age. Historians still argue whether the widespread availability of spectacles directly contributed to the surge in literacy rates during this period, or if it was merely a supporting factor amidst broader educational reforms. It's a chicken and egg question, but certainly, being able to see the words on a page helped. A quirky tidbit from this time involved the myriad of ways people tried to keep their glasses on their faces before comfortable ear hooks became standard. You might see spectacles with long ribbons that tied around the back of the head, or designs that rested precariously on the nose with minimal support. Think of the pince-nez, those elegant but often uncomfortable spring-loaded devices that pinched your nose, or the lorgnette, a pair of glasses with a handle, meant to be held up to the eyes. You'd be at a fancy ball, trying to discreetly read your dance card, all while trying not to drop your lorgnette. It sounds like a mild form of torture, doesn't it? But for many, it was a small price to pay for the ability to see. It's quite amusing to imagine the contortions people went through, just to avoid perpetually losing their glasses to the floor. The comfort we take for granted today, with lightweight frames and perfectly curved arms, truly is a modern marvel. This era really laid the groundwork for our contemporary understanding of vision correction as a universal right, not just a privilege. And so, we arrive at the threshold of the modern era, leaving behind the days of bespoke craftsmanship and slightly precarious nose pinchers, and entering a world where vision correction is a sophisticated science and an everyday convenience. Imagine yourself stepping into a sleek, brightly lit optician's office today. You recline in a comfortable chair, looking into a complex machine that precisely measures the subtle imperfections in your eye's curvature, maps the contours of your cornea, and determines your exact prescription with astonishing accuracy. We've come a long, long way from polished barrel and hand-ground lenses. The 20th century witnessed an explosion of advancements in optometry and ophthalmology. The development of automated lens grinding machines, breakthroughs in lens materials like plastics, and the widespread adoption of standardized eye examinations meant that getting perfectly fitted, lightweight, and affordable spectacles became a global reality. Think of the sheer variety available now. Frames in every color and material imaginable, lenses that are ultra-thin, anti-glare, UV protected, and even transition automatically in sunlight. It's almost overwhelming, isn't it? Just choosing a frame can be an adventure in itself. Beyond traditional spectacles, the 20th century also gave us contact lenses, which, for many, offered a revolutionary freedom from frames. From rigid glass lenses, the technology evolved to soft, breathable hydrogels, allowing millions to correct their vision without external aids. And then, for those who prefer a more permanent solution, surgical interventions like LASIK emerged in the late 20th century, offering the incredible possibility of reshaping the eye itself to achieve perfect vision. Historians still argue whether the invention of contact lenses or the development of refractive surgery had a more profound impact on individual quality of life, but both certainly changed the game. A quirky tidbit that brings us back to the present moment. The rise of digital screens has introduced an entirely new set of challenges for our eyes, giving rise to terms like digital eye strain. Now, instead of worrying about candlelight or dim scriptoriums, you might be thinking about blue light filters and ergonomic monitor setups. It's almost as if, having mastered the art of vision correction, humanity immediately found new ways to strain its eyes. You can almost hear an ancient monk sighing, "Oh, if only I'd known what you people would do with your perfectly corrected vision." It's quite amusing to consider that after centuries of striving for clear sight, we now actively seek ways to protect our eyes from the very light that allows us to see our modern world. The journey of spectacles, from a polished stone to laser surgery, reflects humanity's persistent drive to overcome limitations, to see the world more clearly, and to extend our capabilities. It's a quiet testament to ingenuity, patience, and the continuous evolution of understanding. And as you drift off, perhaps with your own spectacles resting on your bedside table, remember the long, curious history they represent.